First thing I wanted to cover tonight is we should be ending up the skip right now, and then we'll start the OMA, and that's what I'm going to cover tonight with master scheduling. But I'm going to cover master scheduling within the context of the OMA, and so there'll be some other things, but it all relates to scheduling. All the things of the OMA relate to scheduling, but I want to kind of finish up on the skip tonight. As you know, and you know, I'm sure you've already done it, but I'll recount the process or reiterate the process again. When you have submitted and had each of 5 components of the skip evaluated in TaskStream, then the 6th submission for the skip is the overall. So if you look in TaskStream and you see from your work page, it's got skip component A, B, C, D, and E, and then there's a final box that just says skip. That's where the final comprehensive document goes. And you know that I've created templates for you there under TaskStream Tools where you can take all the components and put it in that shell, or you can just put all of yours together. I was covering that for one of my 603 students, as I said, in Garner today, and I reminded him, for example, for each component, you may have background and description of the setting, but you don't need to have that 5 times in your final paper. You know, make it look like it's just one paper you wrote at one time. So it will have that before component A, but it won't be before component B like it is, you know. Just have that one time and make sure that the reference page goes at the end. It has all, it's a comprehensive reference page. Those are really the only 2 things. The abstract is that summary that you have to write in TaskStream when you submit a final comprehensive evidence artifact. You know, when you submit all 6 of them, when you get on that final box to put in the final one, it has a button that says complete form. You have to go in there and do the summary and descriptors. And in TaskStream, under our course materials, under TaskStream Tools, I have a couple of documents to help you with that. Let me go to share screen. Let me go to writing TaskStream summaries. So what you can see now is I've created a document for you that's just a copy and paste out of TaskStream, the same things they ask you. And so what I have is just answer these questions for each of the evidences. For example, the skip has 10 questions. If you answer those 10 questions, you will have written a summary for TaskStream. And then I have at the end how to write a descriptor. You know, a descriptor is 5 sentences. You know, what'd you do, how it was done, what happened as a result. Now, if you don't know what they're asking you, I have a document here for you. That basically is a great example of what a summary would look like for each of the 6 descriptors, and I'll scroll down to the skip, since that's the one we've been working on most recently. Here would be the summary, and here's what she's got for the summary, and then here are the descriptors. And so if you don't know what a descriptor is asking, if you read these, you say, oh, that's what it's asking me. And then you write your 5 sentences. Now, hers are a little bit long, but she's got 5 sentences. Yours don't have to be that long. But remember, when you submit your final skip that has all 5 components in it, it should have a title page. It should have an abstract, which is just copy and paste the TaskStream summary that you wrote. It should have all 5 components. It should have one background and description of the setting, and it should have one reference page at the end that's comprehensive that has the references for all 5 of the components. You click the button that says complete form, you put your summary there, and you put your descriptors in, and then you do final submission for each of the 6 evidence artifacts. And so, again, on our page under course content, go to TaskStream Tools, and all these things that I have just shown you are there. Okay, now, please remember that all these things are due in the assignment Dropbox for Blackboard that you're doing for TaskStream. That makes the bell ring. You know, you do your peer reviews. You put all of the submissions in that you put in TaskStream this semester, and that's all I have for you to do. I don't have any extra papers or anything else for you to write. There's supposed to be a total integration of the evidence artifacts into the coursework. We obviously cover more than just the evidence artifacts, but in terms of writing things other than the discussion boards, and I haven't added any new discussion boards. I want us to concentrate on peer reviews for a week, and then I'll probably put a couple more in. But we're to the point now where we've done a lot of discussion boards. We need to start doing more peer reviews and getting those as that work starts to come in now. We're getting into the back half, or we're more than halfway through this semester. We need to start concentrating on filling up these assignment drop boxes and filling up task stream and doing peer reviews. If we get a lot of more work coming in, we won't do, discussion boards are kind of in there until we get to their peer review phase. And then the peer review kind of takes over from discussion boards. So we need to make sure that we're doing our assignment drop box, adding our materials in there. And as I said, I will email you as documents come in for review, I will email them to you, but make sure we're getting our assignments in there. So tonight we start with master scheduling. And I want to remind you that there are some documents that can help you with your OMA. Again, if you like the quick and dirty, if you like an outline form, that's the quick reference guide. That's because it is quick. That's the whole idea. And here are, so for this particular evidence, the OMA, Organizational Management Analysis, of course, I have what references you will need, what data snapshots you will need in your paper, and then what artifacts you will have generated that can be attached separately for each of the 4 components of the OMA. We have rewritten the OMA to have 5 components starting with the fall class of 2015. We've added a process plan at the end, much like the action and marketing plans in the others, but for you folks, you won't have to do that. But remember, this is under Task Stream Tools, again, in Blackboard, and it's just an overview of the things that you have to have or the things that you need to gather up in order to do this particular evidence. If you need, some folks like the template, and of course here is the template. This is where you put the final one in. It has all the things that you're supposed to have, and it just tells you detailed analysis. It just, it's a shorter version of the notes. It just straight to the point. This is what you got to have here, for each of the parts, and it has some red in there as reminders of some shortcuts. And then it has, you can actually use this. Here's all your legal requirements that I put together for you from North Carolina law, so that you will have those in front of you. And then, of course, I've got creating a process plan. You folks won't do that, but I wanted to show that in there, that's the next logical extension. So you will not have that. The version of the notes that I have under Task Stream Tools does not, the template does not have that. Okay, stop share, go back. All right, so let's start with the OMA from my notes. All right, here we go. The purpose of the OMA is to gather and analyze all available school and community data for the purpose of creating a highly effective master schedule, supervision schedules, as well as optimum management routines. All decisions concerning schedules should be based on best practice, law, or policy. Please identify which of these you're following in a rationale for each decision that you make. So, in actuality, let's speak first to rationale. There is a hierarchy in terms of when you make decisions for your master schedule. Everybody knows what the master schedule is. That's who teaches what, where, and when, and why. It has all your classes, your courses. It has who will be teaching them and what time block in the schedule that they have. That encompasses class size, highly qualified, teacher certification, planning time, duty-free time, all of that together is called your master schedule. Now, a duty roster is where teachers are to be on their duty during the day and other staff members. For example, car rider duty, bus lot duty, hall duty, cafeteria duty, class change duty, all of those kinds of things. Hold 1 second, please. Yes, I'm in class. Yes. Get off on 20. Excuse me for that. My wife had a minor emergency. All right, I'm back. So that's what a duty roster is. It's to make sure that you have adequate supervision of all areas of your school during the day, during times when you have large groups of students that may be together and may be moving. Now, I am not telling you that if you have teachers on duty everywhere in your school that nothing bad will ever happen. What I'm telling you is you create a duty roster and you enforce that duty roster so when you get sued and you go to court, you can show adequate supervision. I'm not telling you that if you have 4 teachers in the cafeteria rather than 3, a fight won't occur. But when you go to court and you can prove that you had at least 1 adult for every 45 students, and let me say that again, 1 adult for every 45 students, that you did in fact have adequate supervision. A supervision schedule as opposed to a duty roster, and I do want to make the distinction between the two. A supervision schedule is for extracurricular or after school activities. One of the mistakes that administrators make, or new administrators, you don't make it but one time, is not understanding that when you have events on your campus, you have to provide adequate supervision for those events. Sean and I were talking earlier about Friday night ball games. Many districts pay for you to have police or security there, but you should also have faculty members there, a certain number of those, to supervise things that are going on there. If you have an after-school concert, you should have supervision. You should have supervision for field trips. All of those off-campus or after-school activities also have to be able to prove adequate supervision if something goes wrong. If you can't, then it won't go well for you. So what we're talking about, the OMA is about looking at everything about your school and community and determining what would be the best master schedule, duty roster, and supervision schedule that would cover you legally from one end to the other. And as I said earlier, now there's a rationale in your decision making about what takes priority. I'm going to attempt to do something here. I don't know if you'll be able. I'll try something new tonight. All right, can you see a Word document on the screen?
Yep.
Blank one? Good.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I thought I might be able to do this tonight. Let's see if we can see what I do. All right. Is that big enough to read?
Yep.
All right. So our first rationale is federal law. This mostly concerns EC 504. I think it's still referred to as ESL. That's English as second language in Wake County for you, Sean. CTE, the old vocational, occupational, whatever you want to call it, career and technical education. Title I, which is a federal program for reading for disadvantaged children who are on free and reduced lunch. AIG, your gifted program that technically falls under the auspices of the EC 504. So those are your most common federal programs. Federal law covers them. Let me give you a prime example. If you have over 50%, but less than 80% of your students on free and reduced lunch, you, as an elementary, you qualify for a Title I program. Now, if you have more than 80%, you're a Title I school. Federal law is very clear. If you have a Title I program, again, more than 50, less than 80%, free and reduced lunch, the federal funds that you get and the faculty members, you get actual teachers that you get for Title I, can only be used with Title I children because you have a large population at your school that is not Title I. If you are a Title I school, let's say you got 80% of your kids on free and reduced lunch, that means 20% aren't. But because you have so many, you are a Title I school, all federal funds that you get for Title I and all personnel that you get for Title I can be used for every child in your building, regardless of whether they're Title I or not. All right, how does that affect scheduling? I made an intern visit to a very out-of-the-way place in southeastern North Carolina. When I got there, they were having a federal Title I audit. Now, it was the kind of place out in the middle of nowhere that you didn't pass it going anywhere. You had to know where it was, and you had to hunt it because it wasn't even on the GPS. I had to go back 2 weeks later and meet the new principal. Now, so the principal retired shortly after the audit because they didn't pass the audit. And the reason they didn't pass the audit, knew they weren't going to pass the audit, or the Title I teacher knew they weren't going to pass it, because what happened was there were 75 children in the third grade. They had 3 teachers. One of them was a Title I teacher. Federal law said because they had only a Title I program, she was only supposed to have a Title I kids, which there were 15. That left 60 kids who were not in the third grade, who were not Title I, for the other 2 teachers. So what that meant was 2 of the third grade teachers would have 30 kids and 1 would have 15. Well, the teachers pitched such a fit, the 2 that weren't Title I, that the principal acquiesced and split the kids up 25, 25, and 25. Well, of course, then the Title I teacher had 10 kids in her room that were not Title I, and she knew that she was responsible for the outcomes only of the 15 Title I kids, and it would be much less likely that she'd meet her objectives or goals with those 15 because she had 10 more with them. And so she picked up the phone and made a call. They did an audit, and the principal had to had to go home. That's what we're talking about in rationale. You must first observe all federal law to begin with, because that money comes, or those positions come with strings attached. You can't have your CTE biology horticulture teacher teaching a section of biology. If you do, you have violated federal law, and they'll want their money back. So there are rules for EC in terms of how kids have to be serviced, whether it's a mainstream inclusion where the teachers are going in the room, or whether it's a pull-out program where kids are mainstream for a majority of the day, but then are pulled out for a couple periods a day with the EC teacher. Whatever the particular organizational emphasis is in your district, if you veer from that and you use that personnel or money in a different way, then the feds will turn that money stream off, and they'll demand that you give money back that you've already spent. That won't go well. So when you're there are certain rules about planning time for CTE. They get a little bit more than regular teachers. You have to be careful when you're doing a duty roster about using them. For example, some of the CTE teachers, especially in business education, are supposed to supervise internships or apprenticeships out in the community. You have to be careful about assigning them to after-school duties because of that. They're on your allotment sheet, but the federal law trumps local board policy or state law. So sometimes those business ed teachers don't have to do after-school duties because they're supervising apprenticeships. Those are the things that you need to know, that federal law comes first. After federal law, you have state law. Again, this is a hierarchy of what comes first. State law speaks to things like class size, duty-free time for teachers, planning time, teacher certification, highly qualified, and it speaks to the length of the instructional day, two more that I was thinking specifically about. Besides the instructional day, the length of the calendar in terms of the number of days, and it speaks to personnel law, personal days, substitute, sick days, and annual leave or vacation days. So those are the kinds of things that state law addresses. Again, it gets back to class size. There are limits in different. It's different for elementary than it is for middle, and it's different for high school. Duty-free time, planning time, how much planning time you get a week. Speaks to teacher certification, especially in high school. Speaks to highly qualified. How long the instructional day has to be, how many days are in the calendar. There were some programs in years past, I think they ended last year, where you could adjust, the state allowed a waiver, you could adjust the length of the instructional day and shorten the number of calendar days. They did that during the financial crisis to let districts kind of catch up financially. I think they have stopped that now. I know, for example, in Wilkes County, they went to a 165-day calendar, and they went an hour extra every day. Those kinds of things. But the state defines that for you. They also define personal days. You have to be careful about allowing teachers to use personal days or annual leave days when you're in school. You technically can't hire a substitute on those days. Then you get into how you're going to pay the sub if you allow them to take those days. Only take 6 days when kids are in the building. All of those kinds of things affect your schedule. They affect your duty roster and your supervision. Third of the rationale is Board of Education policy. And this speaks to things like programs and instructional blocks. That'd be things like they can mandate like 120 minutes for English language arts, what they call ELA, what we used to call reading. They now call it ELA in elementary school. They can have 120 minutes a day of that. And they may decide to have 60 minutes of math, etc. I was at Hickory Grove Elementary on June 11th, 2013. That day is relevant in that Charlotte Mecklenburg had been doing 3D reading for 2 or 3 years at that time, but that particular year, that the state was mandating 3D reading. Well, Charlotte Mecklenburg had already been doing it for 3 or 4 years at that time, and so they just did their regular 90-minute reading blocks each day. And then an edict came from the central office on the morning of Monday morning, June 11, 2013, that they would have to scrap their master schedule and redo the whole thing, which is because of specials and all the itinerant people that you have, like music and art, which is quite an ordeal. And it had to be done by Friday when everybody went off contract on June 15th. They had to scrap their existing schedule because they only had 90 minutes for reading, and because the state was mandating 3D reading, even though they already had it implemented, the state was highly suggesting, and the board adopted, that they would do 120 minutes rather than 90 minutes. And so they had to scrap their whole schedule and start again. And of course, they were having a meltdown because they had closeout and all the other things they need to get done. They thought they already had their schedule in the can. But the board can do things like that. They set policies like that you have to factor into your master schedule. How much, how often that you're going to have each of these particular things. And so that's what board policy is. The fourth of the rationale when you're making decisions about scheduling in your scheduling process is best research practices. And that one, the example that I normally use for that one is reading before lunch in elementary school. So that's a best practice. All the research tells us that kids do better. Now, that's difficult because you've got everybody reading in elementary reading in the morning. What do you specials do? What does reading and what does art and PE and all those do? It makes your scheduling easier to scatter reading all throughout the day, but that's not a best practice. And so that makes it difficult, but that's a best practice. And sometimes Board of Education mandates that it be in the morning, but that's the best research practice. And then fifth and final on the rationale is teacher input. Now, as I was talking about the Title I school earlier, what the mistake that the principal made, he allowed teacher input to trump federal law. You can't do that. If you get caught, and you will get caught because teachers will tell it. And then I was asked, well, couldn't they just change their schedule and correct that? I said, but the problem was every month in North Carolina, principals have to send 2 reports into the state and do it electronically. The first one is principal's monthly report. We talked about that one before, about average daily membership. That's how you're funded, not by the number of kids on the roster, but how many show up every day. And the second is called the SAR. SAR. Let me do that one. The school activity report. And basically that's your master schedule. You have to present your master schedule, what teachers are teaching what, where, and when, and how many kids are in their room. The problem is when the principal divided the kids up and gave 10 more to the Title I teacher, he didn't change the master schedule. So the master schedule reflected that each of the 2 regular ed teachers had 30 each, and that his Title I teacher had 15. When in reality, when you walk down the room and open the door and count it, they all had 25. That shows an intent to misreport or to defraud the state or the federal government, in this case, out of their money. You can't do that. We've talked about that before. Nobody can give you permission to break the law. And if you do, there's certain things, if you break the law, it's a go home offense. This is a go home offense. If you create a master schedule, put it into PowerSchool so that it generates your school activity report every month, and you intentionally then go and change that, and you're out of compliance and you're misspending federal dollars especially, and you knowingly have done that, and you show intent to defraud the federal government, that's a go home. So some of these things in your schedule, when you're out of compliance on your school activity report, it's just a simple mistake and you can change it around and fix it. But some things you can't. If you schedule that complied with all federal and state laws and board policies, and then you actually run a different schedule from that, you start changing and monkeying with it and change that schedule, and that's not a good thing. What you need to do, rather than change your schedule, is change your scheduling process, or go back to that hierarchy and say, can I change this schedule? These teachers don't like this. Teacher input is they don't like it. They don't like that they've got 30 and their colleague has got 15. Can I change that? You go back and look at your hierarchy or of rationale here. No, because teacher input's 5. Federal law is 1. It's real simple. 1 trumps 5, 2 trumps 5, 3. That's the way it works. So you have to develop a rationale. You have to understand. You have to know what all the laws are. Yes, you need to know all your data points. You need to know all about your school and community, and that's what we had you do in A. But you need to understand that all that contributes to being able to make a schedule, but the overall process has to be guided by a rationale, and this is the rationale. So when we get back to Dale's notes, it tells you that right in the beginning, all decisions concerning schedules and routines based on best practice law or policy, please identify which of these rationale. Now, I've just got it all, but you have to understand what the rationale is. You have to understand that federal law comes first, state law, board policy, best practices, teacher input, in that order. That's the way it works. So in Part A of the OMA, your internal context includes all the areas of the TWC, information from your school improvement plan in terms of what your academic areas of interest are, or what areas academically that you are going to work on for the year, math, reading, or whatever. All 4 areas of the old report card, and those included school profile, which talked about your school, quality teachers, which talked about teacher qualifications, master's degree, highly qualified, those kinds of things. Safe and orderly schools, which had your discipline numbers in terms of suspensions, acts of crime and violence, attendance figures, those kinds of things. And the other is high student achievement, which has all your standardized test scores. That's your internal context. That's what your school looks like. Your external context, is basically census data, and all that stuff can be found in your SACS report or Advanced Ed, whichever accreditation system you use in your school district. Census data, when we're talking about average income, average education, those kinds of things that puts your community, your school's community in context. Which has a lot to do with schedule and duty roster and those kinds of things. You should present also your existing master schedule, duty roster, and supervision schedule. You're not to create a new one in Part A or Part D. That's a mistake. Students think that they're supposed to create one, in Part D when we get there. No, you just present your existing one here, and you'll present it again in Part D later.
Do we need to present the entire thing? Because My school's 170 plus teachers with 7 class periods. I mean, that thing is a document that's about 65 pages long.
That's why you attach it separately as an artifact.
Okay.
You just basically do it. I generally have you do kind of like a 1 or 2 page data snapshot of it, and then the whole thing. That's what in that evidence artifact quick reference guide. I think I've already clicked off of it. Um, I have. It tells you that in that quick reference guide. You show us a snapshot of it. The whole thing, exactly. The whole thing goes as an artifact.
Okay.
Good question. And then the last thing that you do for part A, and this is very important, is you interview your principal and school leadership team. And, I don't like it when folks interview the school secretary, the financial secretary. That's not who we want. We want you to interview the principal and the school leadership team to determine how much input that the school improvement team, that school, most some schools, the school leadership team is the school improvement team and vice versa, or in some they're different. But specifically, we're talking about the school improvement team that's in charge of the school improvement plan and what resources are going to be used for what, where and when, and what the emphasis for the year is going to be academically. What input and how involved are they in the budgeting process? See, the conflict arises in you have this school improvement team who says these are our priorities for the year, but then they're not involved in budget, and if the money doesn't come, then those priorities don't happen. There has to be a congruency or a marriage, if you will, of the people who are making budget decisions and the people who are making school improvement plan decisions. That's a big problem. That's a disconnect. Every school district now sends a template out to the school principal to develop a school improvement plan. And it looks much like my notes do for the SIOP. It's supposed to, the sixth one, which is putting all of the first 5 of these evidence together, you put them together in the sixth one, the SIOP, and it becomes your school improvement plan. During this process. Well, that's much the way the principal puts together their school improvement plan. They have their instructional component, their staff development, school and community involvement, their scheduling, their cultural, which includes discipline, the CAP, teacher working condition survey. They put all that together, it becomes their school improvement plan. There's a template now, and they tell you what sources you can use. The central office does. You don't have to use everything on the list, but you can't use anything not on the list. It's all validated stuff, but the idea is you can't add anything into your school improvement plan that you don't have resources in hand for. It can't be, contingent upon funding or contingent upon getting that teacher or whatever. Everything that goes in your school improvement plan, you must have resources. That means personnel and fiscal resources in hand at the time you put it in your school improvement plan. Well, the problem arises when you have a school leadership team, which includes the principal, making resource decisions and they don't include the people who put together the school improvement plan, and you don't have the resources to carry out your school improvement plan. That's a problem. The state and the local want to get around that. So what they're looking for you to find out is, does your school in fact marry those two? Is there congruency so that whatever the school improvement plan team comes up with in terms of a school improvement plan, that the folks making the budgeting decisions are married to that and commit the resources to carry out that school improvement plan. So you're to go and interview your principal and school leadership team to determine what level of involvement does that school improvement team who came up with the school who's charged with coming up, or is it the same group so that there's not a problem?
Is it typical? I know our school, I've actually talked with my principal a lot about the budgeting stuff. We have a single person who is like the head of our school improvement team, and he's whoever the head of that school improvement team is one of the primary people on the leadership committee too. Like it's an automatic marriage between the school leadership team and the SIP team.
But that's not always the case, and traditionally years ago it wasn't the case at all. They were two completely different groups, and then one would say this is what we're going to do, and the other one was like, well, do whatever you want to. We're just not giving you the money. This is how we think the money ought to be spent. Whoever controls the resources in terms of the money and the personnel determines what happens in a school, not the people who make the plan. So if there's not that natural marriage, then you've got a problem. So what will happen is your school improvement plan won't get carried out.
Right.
But you're exactly right. That's the perfect way to make sure that the head, the chair of your school improvement team is a member of your school leadership team, which makes these budgeting decisions. And by the way, as we talked earlier, budgeting is not taking all the money, dividing it equally. When you're making budgeting decisions, some people don't get any. Some get a lot. You have to put the money where your priorities are. If you divide it up, then you weaken everybody. If you don't give anybody enough to get done what they need to get done, then some folks may not get any. But you have to make sure that your money goes to your priorities, and that's the whole notion. All right, and the descriptors that you will have met there, they are on the screen. Works with others to incorporate input of school improvement team in budget and resource decisions. See, that's exactly what we're talking about. It's exactly what we're talking about. Works with others to effectively implement rules and procedures. Goes back to rationale. And there's what an accomplished component would look like according to the state. Analysis of school context at the end includes demographic, interviewing students and staff, and placing within a state and national context. Obviously, if you got state test scores and you got all the stuff from the state report card, everything's in the state context, and it's also in a national context. So that's what it looks like. Component B of the OMA it's the teacher empowerment component of the APTEL, where you identify teachers using best practices and use them to work with teachers who are not. You lead a staff development. Basically what it's asking you to do is you are to assume responsibility for leading activities that address instructional capacity. That's what you did in the APTEL. The second of the evidence is you addressed instructional capacity. Instructional capacity is classroom leadership or classroom empowerment, how well you manipulate those Marzano's 9 high-yield strategies. And so if you've already done that, where you identified your best teachers and had them teach the others, either whole group, PLC, or one-on-one coaching, and you led that, then you can just use what you did there here. And I've got that also in the template. We're putting this together. It's basically component C, D, and E of the APTEL is what it is. If you didn't do that, or if you haven't done that, try to put those two together. Don't try. My point is, don't try to do two staff development activities. Don't wear your school out. You can do one, and based on Marzano, and use it in both places, both for the APTEL and here for OMA component B is the notion. Component C, assessing services for special populations. 4 required are EC 504, ESL, academically AIG, and your intervention team referrals. You won't have as many of those intervention referrals. You do have a SST at your high school for kids who are having academic difficulty or behavior difficulty, but let's talk about those. The 4 required are EC 504. What you need to do for them is basically give an overview of what they're supposed to get in your district, whether you're doing mainstream or whether you're doing inclusion. What are they supposed to get? And then you interview your EC department chair to find out if they are in compliance with what they're supposed to get. Is your head count up to date, or are revals being done on time, or new IAPs being written and followed? Are you, in fact, delivering the services that you are federally required to deliver for EC 504? It is the intent of this activity to determine if the school is providing legally compliant and ethically sound services to all children. That's the whole point. So you say, this is what they're supposed to get, this is what they get, and this, we are in compliance according to our EC chair. So you do that. You do the same thing for your ESL program. I think it's still called ESL in Wake. Some places call it LEP, some call it ELLA. I've heard it now referred to in some places as ESOL. Whatever it is, it's your non-English speaking children. Same thing. What are they supposed to get? What are they getting? Talk with your ESL teacher. Are you compliant? Academically gifted, same thing. What are they supposed to get in your district? Different levels, even within the district, different schools, AIG is different. They don't do much with them in elementary school. They just identify them and give them some extra books to read, I understand. Whereas later on, they do more with them. When they get to high school, they basically all you do there is you put them in advanced courses the first 2 years in high school, and then they automatically go to AP or IB once they get to be juniors and seniors. There's not a program per se. It's just how they're scheduled.
Does there have to be a academically gifted advisor or person in the school? Because I'm not even aware if we have one.
There is a person, it's usually a counselor.
Okay.
Now, I know I had Brianna Avery at Ligon Middle in Raleigh, down on South Saunders Street, downtown. She was the AIG coordinator for the middle school, but she was a counselor.
Okay.
So I think that's the way they do it in Wake. I'll use her as an example. Now, if I'm wrong, I am, but that's the way they did it at Ligon.
Yeah, I'm just curious because we're such a large we have such a large number of those students anyway, being a magnet school.
Yes.
I don't know how all that works within my own school, to be honest, because about half our population would be listed as academically gifted.
Your magnet director may be your AG coordinator, but it's either your magnet director. If it's an AG magnet school, it's your magnet director. If it's not, it's one of your counselors. Y'all, just ask around.
Okay.
One of the persons on your campus is designated as the AIG coordinator. Find out if what services they're supposed to be getting and if they're getting them for your AIG. And then the last one is the most important. It's the most overlooked and the one that folks who are not administrators don't even know about. Mostly it's done in elementary school, but there is an intervention team on your campus, whether you're middle, high school, or elementary. Elementary, it's most salient, I guess, because you have younger kids and they're having difficulty, and they are referred to the SST intervention team, care team, MSST, that's multi-tiered student services team. Whatever you want to refer to it, there is a team on your or a group or a committee on your campus that teachers refer students to who are having difficulty either with academics or behavior or both. In elementary school, they use RTI, response to intervention, as a part of a multi-tiered approach to doing interventions with them. That can last up to 90 days, and then they can be referred, and then the 90-day process starts, the actual federally mandated 90-day process where they get 30 days of anecdotals where you gather information, 30 days of intervention, and 30 more days of either the same intervention if it's working or a new intervention. At the end of that 90-day process, an EC testing decision is made. Now, the state refers, regardless of what your district calls it or what name your school uses, calls it care team or whatever it is, some cute acronym in different elementary schools, the state refers to all of those as a school-based committee or SBC. Why that's important for you as a potential administrator is if something goes wrong with the head count in EC, that's on the compliance coordinator or compliance technician, the EC department chair. If something goes wrong with AIG, same thing. If something goes wrong with, if you've got Title I, it's the Title I coordinator for your district. If something goes wrong with the intervention process where kids are not getting tested in a timely fashion, or they're not getting their interventions, or they're not getting their interventions and they're being tested too soon, that's on the principal. 3 summers ago in Charlotte-Mecklenburg, 11 elementary principals got reassigned the week before school got started in August. And the problem is that African American males in their school they were getting tested for EC immediately. They were not going through the multi-level system prior to the 90-day intervention system either. They weren't getting either. They were being referred one day and tested within the next week or so. That's a violation of their civil rights. The Office of Civil Rights demanded an audit. As a result of the audit, 11 principals got moved because they were not providing that mandatory 90-day intervention system. Now, generally, most districts are doing a 90-day before that. That's why they call it multi-tiered student services system. They're doing RTI and some other interventions before the actual official 90 days starts when kids are having difficulty. But regardless of what your district, whether you do the 90 and 90 or whether you just do the 90, that's the principal's in charge of that. Now, the EC teacher or an EC teacher or the EC chair is generally on your care team or your IST or your intervention team. They're not in charge. They're just there as a resource person. Because remember, these kids have not been identified as EC yet, and they may not ever be. They're just there to make sure that the process is being followed legally, that federal 90-day process, mandated process. And if it doesn't go well, it's on the principal. And bad things, again, that's one of those go-home offenses or go somewhere else at a lower job designation offense. The ones in Charlotte-Mecklenburg, some of them were old enough to retire. The others were reassigned as assistant principals. They were demoted. So it's that's one of those you better be aware of. Something, if anything goes wrong with that intervention team referral process, that's back on the principal. So you need to make sure that you assess the services of at least those 4 groups. Now, speaking to the folks who aren't online with us tonight, if you have Title I in your school, you should add that. I don't have it in my notes because everybody doesn't have Title I. Everybody is mandated to have the ones that I have on the screen here. But if you have Title I, that'll be the 5th one. So that's what you're supposed to do. You find out what these 4 particular areas, what they're supposed to get, what they're getting, and are you compliant? All right, and then we get to the final one, building a schedule. That's a misnomer. You are not to build a schedule. What you are to do is pull together, again, from Part A, you pull together your master schedule, your duty roster, and your supervision schedule, and analyze it to make sure that it meets all laws, guidelines, policies, identified needs, and areas that are emphasis from your school improvement plan. Does it address those? Look at your duty roster and supervision schedule to make sure that they're adequate. You have adequate supervision. Now, you analyze that, but you don't just analyze the product. You analyze the process. Is your school following that rationale that I talked about earlier? Again, if you come out with schedules that are not legal or don't work, it's usually because, again, it goes back to the process. You did not follow this rationale. That's how you generally end up with an illegal or a bad schedule. You didn't understand, what the hierarchy was. So when you get to D, you analyze not only your master schedule, duty roster, and supervision schedule, but you analyze the process that led you to that. and you make recommendations to either change the process, like we were talking about. You don't have the school leadership team chair is not on the school improvement chair is not on the school leadership team, so you can't put your resources where you need them for your school improvement plan. They're not reflected in your master schedule and the activities that you do in your school. So you analyze both the actual documents, but the process that led to the development of those documents being master schedule, duty roster, supervision schedule. You look at both of those, and you make recommendations to either change the process or change the actual schedule itself. And that's what concludes Part D. So let me read through the directions for it again right quick to make sure I've got them all. All right. Analyze schools' master schedules, make sure it meets all the time. You would list the strengths, weaknesses of your schedule and the scheduling process and recommendation for improvement, both the scheduling process as well as the actual master schedule duty roster. So you list the strengths and weaknesses, what was good about it, what was bad about it, both the process and the actual product, and then you make recommendations to fix the actual product or the process that got you the product. And then you give the rationale, the actual number, 1 through, making this recommendation based on federal law, making this one based on a best research practice, making this one based on state law. Because what they want you to understand by doing this is that your schedule adheres to legal requirements for planning and instructional time, works with others to ensure compliance with federal, state, and district mandates, communicate and enforce clear expectations, rules, structures, procedures for students. That's your duty roster and your supervision schedule. Review scheduling processes and protocols that maximize staff input and address diverse student learning needs. Staff input's got to be in there, but it's got to be number 5. It can't be number 1. So if you've done that, if you have followed my notes here, you will have met that one. Part A is a data dump. It takes a while to put all that stuff together, but it's out there. And then you got your interview to do with your principal and leadership team to make sure that they allow the school improvement team input into budget decisions so that the priorities are funded in terms of dollars and personnel. In Part B, it's the staff development that you do for the APTEL, where you lead a group of teachers in staff development in Marzano, which is classroom empowerment, classroom leadership. Part C, you assess all your special populations. What are they supposed to get? What are they getting? Interview the people in charge to make sure that they're compliant. And then in Part D, you analyze the product and the process of the master schedule, duty roster, and supervision schedule. Determine strengths and weaknesses. Speak specifically to planning and instructional time and all these other things here. That's why I have them listed in the template. Let me go back to it. I'll have to pull it up. So if you look at OMA, what I've done for you to help you with D is as I said, I've already listed all the legal stuff for planning and instructional time. It's right here. Make sure that you can actually use this. You can put it in your paper, turn it from red to black, and say that we meet all of these conditions. You need to speak to that one specifically when you're saying strengths and weaknesses, when you're doing your analysis, and then it's here for you. I better quit rolling it. I have it right here for you. Legal requirements for planning and instructional time. So when we go back and look at Part D again, one of the descriptors from this one that speaks specifically to planning and instructional time. That's why I put that in the template for you. so that you would know exactly what they are. And if you want to do your own research and find all those on your own, that's great. If you don't, just look at my template. They're already there for you. I'm not so much interested in making you dig them all out as knowing what they actually are. So that's how you do the OMA. That's what we're going to be focused on for the remainder of the semester in terms of our evidence. Is we should be pretty much through the skip by now. We should be through the other things, and the OMA will be our final exam. You'll put it in. So you need to go ahead and all of you start planning your time and when you're going to interview your principal about and school leadership team about inclusion of the folks from the school improvement team in budget decisions. And you're going to need to get out and do those interviews with your ESL person, your EC person, your AIG person, and your intervention team person. Get out and do those. And if you haven't done your staff development yet, if you have, just a copy and paste of C, D, and E from the APTEL. If you haven't done it yet, you need to get out and lead a group of teachers in Marzano. So there's a lot to do in this one. It's a lot of legwork. If you plan it out, it doesn't take that long. But there's some things you have to actually go out and do with people and gather information rather than just going online or pulling data together from print sources or from electronic sources. You actually have to go out and gather some of this data by qualitative means, which is interview and observation. So in this case, it'd be interviews. A qualitative methodology that you learned in 602. Quantitative is hard numbers that are derived from a validated measure like a test. Qualitative data is gathered through interviews. So you got a lot of qualitative work to do on this one. John, what questions do you have for me? Is this pretty clear?
Yeah, I think I'm good.
All right. I want to review one more thing before we go tonight. Again, our assignment Dropbox for peer reviews. Midterm exam is the skip. The final exam is the OMA, so you should have all your skip. So pretty much now the PSYOP, these are related to the two that you've done here. So they're not any new work. So let's look at what's expected from component E and D from the PSYOP. Let me, again, go here. I'll share your screen. So Part D is basically skip Part A. If you pull together your group, you just do a copy and paste. And Part E is the resources that you did in skip Part C, but you just add the resources it'll take to run all your action plans along with the marketing plan. You keep the same format as skip C, where you listed your human and physical resources necessary to run your marketing plan for your skip. You just add to that the resources needed to run the app cell, the app tail, and the cap. And if you'll remember, I always have you do that same graphic organizer summary of each of your action plans for that specific reason. So you've already identified your resources. Just go back and do a copy and paste and add them to skip C. And so in the end, what you will have for PSYOP Part E is all the resources that it will take to run the marketing plan from the skip and the action plans from the cap, app cell, and app tail. And so that, again, that's a copy and paste. And then looking ahead in PSYOP Part F, the final component, it's just putting all the action and marketing plans together in one graphic organizer or stacking them on top of one another if you went ahead and did them as we went through. So again, the PSYOP, there is no new work. It is just like building a school improvement plan. You divide it up in sections. One committee is working on the instructional plan for the year. One's working on staff development. One's working on schedule. One's working on school and community involvement. One's working on discipline and school culture. When we pull it all together, it becomes a school improvement plan. That's what the PSYOP is. number 6, the sixth evidence, is just pulling all this work that you've done together, specific parts and components of it, putting it together, and it becomes your school improvement plan. So, the good thing about it is all skip an OMA this semester, getting it knocked out, and then you'll pretty much have what you need for D&E for the SOP when you get that done. So that's not like got to do any additional work for those. Okay, so if we go back again to our assignment Dropbox, again, it's just skip OMA, and then these two that are related to them. Just copy and paste. All right. Anything else tonight? I'll be back online for everybody else. I'll be back online tomorrow night at 7 if you got questions or if you want to talk. And so, if nothing else, Sean, it's always good to see you. I was telling Tim today, I may try to get back to the Raleigh area to the group meeting again one more time. Everybody's doing great, but I'll probably try to get back one more time before the end of the semester. So I'll let you know when that is if you want to come over to Enloe.
Okay.
All right. Good to hear from you. Good to see you.
Have a good one.
Yeah. You too. Bye-bye.